Hello. This recording is a brief introduction to Quality Matters for the faculty committee that's looking on online standards. I'd like to focus on the main elements of the rubric and a brief overview to help you understand what's going on. The QM rubric measures only online and blended standards and only course design. It doesn't evaluate any of your content. It doesn't evaluate the instructor, and it doesn't evaluate what you may do or not do during the course. The simple view of thinking about the rubric is that it only applies to things that happen before the course actually is turned on for students and how it's arranged and the material that's arranged within it. It's certainly content independent. In the rubric itself, there are a variety of standards, but there's 8 general standards, and I think you can read those for yourself. There is a detailed list in the online faculty standards Canvas course that lists the individual standards and all of the substandards within those. But I think you can see they cover overview, objectives, assessment, instructional materials, course activities and learner interaction, course technology, learner support, and accessibility. If you notice that 5 of those are in bold, 6 of those are in bold, those specific standards, actually there's 5, those specific standards have to be something called alignment. And alignment is simply the fact that for some things, they all have to match, they all have to blend. For example, if you have a course objective and you have assessment, the goal of the assessment is to measure what the objective is. If it does, then that's called aligned. And the alignment standards are a little more complicated and they have some more to them, but it is an important part of QM. I think the idea here is to say that the learning objectives are the basis of the entire QM structure. The assessments at the top are the way that you'd measure that, and the things that support the assessments measuring the learning objectives are both the instructional materials, the activities in the course, and the actual tools in the course, some of which in Canvas, some of which maybe in publisher sites that help a course actually run. Breaking down the standards a little more, in between the 8 general standards, there are 21 what are called specific review standards that are essential. In a hierarchy, there's essential, there's very important, and important. If you look at the graph on the right-hand side, the 21 essential standards are worth 3 points in the QM world. The 14 very important standards are worth 2 points in the QM world, and the important standards, the 8 of those, are each worth 1 point in the QM world. So every standard, and if you kind of add those up, 21 plus 14 plus 8, all of those standards are described and are laid out in the QM link in your online faculty standards Canvas course. Okay, so there's a variety of different standards with a little bit difference of importance in them. If you are looking at any individual standard, Quality Matters uses something called the 85% rule that essentially says is that for any individual standard, if you're a reviewer, you'll think about that standard and say, does this meet the standard that I'm looking at an 85% level, at a B plus level, depending on your grading scale? It doesn't have to be perfect, but does it meet an 85%? Now, that's a little hard sometimes to get agreement on that, but that's why reviews often have more than one person in it. Okay, so if we added up all of the total points, if we go back to here and we add the 21 times 3, 14 times 2, 8 times 1, we would end up with 99 total points. So for an individual course to meet standard, it would, at the 85% level, need to score an 84 out of the 99 total possible. Reviewers would use their own gauge of what 85% is to see if an individual standard is met or not met. So for example, let's say I was looking at accessibility standard and I was looking at, do my videos, are they captioned? You have 16 weeks, you have 15 videos, and 2 aren't captioned. Well, that probably meets the 85% level. You wouldn't need each and every last video to be captioned. Or are your course objectives readable or understandable? Well, at the 85% level, just what would that mean? And an individual reviewer acting independently would determine what that basically is. Okay. For a whole course to meet either an informal Quality Matters standard set or meet the overall QM review, 2 things must happen. Every one of the 21 3-point standards, the essential standards, must be met. And we'll look at what met means here in a second. And in the total, you have to achieve a score of 84 of the 99 points that are total possible, and both of those things to happen. So if you're getting a course ready to go through a QM review, you need to make sure not only that every 3-point standard be met, but that of the remaining ones, of the remaining points, that you achieve 85% of those. Okay. In the QM world, there's no 2.5 points, 1.5 points. You don't average them. A standard's either met or not met. So if a standard's met, an essential standard's met, it earns 3 points. If very important, it earns 2 points. If they're not met, they earn 0 points. In an unofficial QM review, and slipping into the review process just a little bit, you can use these QM standards to review your own course. You can, as a department, review individual courses within the departments, or an institution can review a course to meet our internal requirements. For example, if we had a standard that says every course at SCF needed to reach a QM standard, then we could do that also. But notice these are informal reviews because they're done at the institution level or below. Our site license for Quality Matters allows us to do all 3 of these unofficial reviews. In an official review, however, it's a little different process. There's actually teams of 3 reviewers that score independently and individually. There's a online software tool where you go through the standards. You either click on met or not met individually. Those 3 scores are combined and the course either meets the standard or not. Again, with 21 of the 3-point standards completely met, and an 85% or 84 points out of the total possible of 99. It's a little more complicated than that. It takes couple of hours to go through the whole QM formal review process, but bottom line is whether we're doing an informal review or a formal review, we have to follow the same standards. We can't pick and choose or adapt them. This is copyrighted material. It has to be presented based on our site license as is. It's either all or nothing. You can't say that standard sounds good and use it in your own class because it's officially part of the QM standard. If you were doing a formal review, there would be 3 faculty reviewers. The details of those is they must have taught online in the last year, be experienced. They must have attended a formal Applying the QM rubric class that we teach here on campus. One of the reviewers must be outside of the institution for a formal review. For an informal review, they can be inside. And one of them must have special training to be the team chair, sometimes called the master reviewer, and that's usually someone inside. The instructor participates as something called the course representative. They get to see the review first. They get to be involved in the discussions, and they're consultant during the individual review. But this peer review team, there's some leeway on that on an individual institution level, but in a formal QM review, you follow these specific guidelines. A couple of caveats. As part of our license agreement with QM, and they're fairly strict, actually they're more than fairly strict, we must be a subscribing member, which we are. We have to use all of the elements in the QM rubric as is. You can't use any of the elements partially or just some of them or change the scoring. It's all or nothing. And technically you're not allowed to provide any materials. For example, I couldn't provide this PowerPoint describing this part of the process to anyone outside of the SCF institution under the terms of our license. So it's a little specific, but not as bad as it seems. In closing, this presentation isn't intended to cover the individual elements of the rubric itself. I'll try to put up another longer video that relates to that, but I think you can figure out what the standards are by clicking on the QM link in the faculty online standards course, and they are there. I appreciate you taking your time to view this, and I hope it helps any. If you have any specific questions, please call or email, and I'd be happy to go through that with you. I've been involved in QM since almost the very beginning. I've used standard 1, or excuse me, rubric 1, which is essentially a checklist of things to have in your class, all the way through this being rubric 5, that's good through 2017. All right, thank you, and we'll see you at the next meeting.